There's a kind of violence that doesn't leave a bruise, but it changes a person's posture for years. It's when your sentence gets cut off midway, your idea gets run over, your presence gets pushed to the side, and without even realizing it, you start speaking smaller. You start asking permission to exist. And the strangest part is that this can happen even with good people, in regular conversations, with folks who don't even mean to hurt you. They just take up the space. And by the time you notice, your voice is already apologizing before it even says anything. A lot of people think getting interrupted is just the other person being rude. But there's a deeper detail. When it keeps happening, it creates a habit inside you. A habit of giving in too soon. A habit of stepping out of your own center. And for a Stoic, losing your center is dangerous, because that's where your freedom lives. Epictetus kept it simple. Some things are up to us, others aren't. You don't control someone else's impulsiveness, but you do control how you respond. And responding isn't about yelling, competing, or proving you're tough. It's about choosing the right move, at the right time, with as little poison as possible. You might recognize yourself here. You were sharing something important and someone jumps in, changes the subject, cracks a joke, opens an endless side story. You smile politely, but inside you feel small. And what hurts isn't just the interruption. It's the silent message. Your thoughts can wait. But when that becomes routine, your own subconscious learns, I can wait. And then you start waiting even when you shouldn't. In Jungian psychology, when we swallow our own voice too much, the shadow builds up. The shadow is everything you repress just to keep being accepted. You become the easygoing person, the nice one, the chill one, but underneath, an irritation grows that has nowhere to go. And sooner or later, that shadow collects interest. Sometimes it explodes, sometimes it turns into exhaustion, sometimes it becomes giving up. Why even bother speaking? Stoicism doesn't ask you to get hard, it asks you to get clear. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself like someone cleaning their own mirror. Not to please anyone, but to not lose himself. And when someone talks over you, the risk isn't just not getting to speak. The risk is believing you have to shrink to keep the peace. And that's not peace. That's surrender. So throughout this video, I want to offer you 7 phrases, not as language tricks, not as a script to dominate the conversation. A Stoic doesn't want to dominate. A Stoic wants not to be dominated by impulses, by others, or by their own fears. These are simple, smart phrases that work because they carry an inner posture, firmness without aggression. And maybe, just maybe, they'll serve as little anchors so you don't lose yourself. The first phrase is almost like breathing turned into words. Hold on just a second, I'm not done yet. Notice the rhythm. It's short, it's human, it doesn't humiliate. You're not accusing anyone, you're stating a fact. You're not done yet. There's dignity in finishing a thought. An impatient person might look surprised. A rude person might make a face. But a Stoic doesn't negotiate with faces. They stick to what's right and let the rest fall where it may. This phrase works best when it's followed by something few people value. Silence afterward. You say it and you don't rush to explain yourself. You don't laugh to smooth over the awkwardness. You just keep going. Most interruptions happen because people sense you'll back down fast. When you don't back down, no drama, the world adjusts. Not always, but often. And if your heart starts racing in that moment, watch it like training. Seneca talked a lot about anticipating difficulties, mentally rehearsing what might throw you off so you're not a slave to surprise. Your anxiety is just a sign of an old habit, the habit of shrinking. And habits, no matter how old, can be retrained. The second phrase is a more elegant sister to the first, especially in more sensitive conversations. I want to hear what you think, but I need to finish my point first. See what it does. It acknowledges the other person without erasing yourself. It doesn't say shut up, it says, I value you, and I value myself too. That's rare, and because it's rare, it lands. This brings in a core Stoic principle. Justice. Justice isn't just being fair to others, it's being fair to yourself. You deserve to finish a sentence, you deserve not to be run over. And when you state that calmly, you're practicing virtue, not vanity. Maybe you were taught that polite people let others talk. But that becomes a trap when the other person never gives the space back. Politeness isn't submission. Politeness is order. It's taking turns. It's reciprocity. And if there's no reciprocity, it's not a conversation. It's an occupation. The third phrase brings that sense of order with gentleness. Can we take turns? I'll listen to you and then you listen to me. It's almost childlike in how simple it is, and that's why it works. You turn chaos into a rule. You put the conversation back on track. And notice, you're not asking for a favor. You're proposing a fair format. Here's a painful observation. Some people don't interrupt out of malice. They do it out of anxiety, insecurity, or the need to be seen. Others interrupt as a power move. In both cases, your response doesn't have to be a moral judgment. It needs to be a boundary. A Stoic isn't naive. They see human nature as it is, without idealizing it. The problem is that setting a boundary touches an old fear, the fear of displeasing, the fear of losing affection, the fear of being seen as difficult. But think about it calmly. What kind of affection demands that you disappear to exist? What kind of peace only happens when you stay quiet? When you use these phrases, you're not creating conflict. You're ending a silent conflict that was already there. The conflict between your need to express yourself and the habit of giving in. And every time you speak up clearly, you teach the world something, but mostly you teach your own subconscious. I can take my space without becoming violent. If this is already bringing up a memory, some family dinner, some meeting, some relationship, where you were always interrupted, hold that memory without bitterness. Look at it the way Marcus Aurelius would, as a fact of life, not as your destiny. You don't control the past, but you control the move right now. And sometimes the most courageous move isn't raising your voice. It's holding your own sentence to the end like someone holding on to their own existence. There's a point where interruption stops being just interruption. It becomes a test of how much you can be pushed without moving from your spot. And if you're honest with yourself, you might realize, in a lot of conversations, you already walk in ready to lose. You already come in feeling like you have to be quick, funny, convincing, or you'll get cut off. And that rush is what weakens you. Whoever rushes to speak gives the other person the feeling you're borrowing space. A Stoic trains the opposite. Presence. Not the theatrical kind where you're trying to grab attention, but the solid kind where you're not begging for validation. Epictetus would say, don't wish things to happen as you want. Wish them to happen as they do. But that's not passivity. That's realism. You got interrupted? Great. Life just gave you today's exercise. Stay calm and hold your boundary. The fourth phrase is a tool of civility that disarms a lot of people. I'll keep going and then I'll hand it over to you. It has a curious effect because it gives reassurance. The interrupter often jumps in because they fear they won't get heard later. By saying, I'll hand it over to you, you take away their panic, and at the same time you don't give up your turn. You're holding the wheel without speeding up. And notice how smart this is. You're not getting into a power struggle over who's in charge. You're organizing the conversation. You're creating a tiny verbal contract. And if the other person still pushes, it becomes clear to anyone paying attention that the issue isn't lack of space, it's lack of respect. The fifth phrase is stronger and should be used sparingly, like a sword you don't draw lightly. If I can't finish now, I'd rather pick this up later. This isn't a threat. It's a consequence. You're withdrawing your energy from the chaos. You're saying, I'm not going to serve my mind in slices. And there's a lot of dignity in that. Seneca advised something that sounds simple but is brutally hard. Choosing where you put your time. Time is your life in currency. When someone repeatedly talks over you, they're spending your currency without permission. And by accepting it, you're funding the habit. So sometimes the most stoic move is to stop. Not out of spite. Out of hygiene. Just like you step away from a noisy place to hear your own thoughts better, you step away from a chaotic conversation to not lose your center. Here's an important psychological point. Some people have an old wound around their own voice. They grew up in environments where speaking was dangerous. where adults interrupted, mocked, belittled, and as adults they keep living like they're still in that old room. They anticipate the interruption and shut down ahead of time. They think setting a boundary is starting trouble. But the trouble was already there. It was just invisible. Jung would say that when you don't give conscious shape to what you feel, it takes unconscious shape. If you don't say, "I'm not done yet," your body says it for you. In the tension in your jaw, the knot in your throat, the exhaustion after a social encounter. What isn't said collects a bill, and it charges high. The sixth phrase is maybe the most sophisticated, because it works like a calm mirror. Before you go on, what did you hear me say so far? See the beauty in that. You're not fighting. You're pulling the conversation back to reality. You're asking for the content. And by doing that, you reveal an uncomfortable truth. A lot of interruptions happen because the other person isn't listening. They're just waiting for their turn to talk. This question is powerful because it demands presence. If they were really listening, they'll summarize and the conversation gets better. If they weren't, they stumble and realize they rushed. And again, you don't have to humiliate anyone. Just ask and stay silent. Silence here is a teacher. It doesn't accuse, it reveals. Marcus Aurelius talked a lot about not getting disturbed by what people do, but by what you think about what they do. When you're interrupted, your mind starts making stories. They don't respect me. I'm invisible. I'm weak. Some of those stories might have a grain of truth, but the question is, are you going to live inside them? Or are you going to act clearly and reduce the mental drama? These phrases aren't for controlling the other person. They're for you not to be controlled by your own fear of confrontation. Because in practice, what paralyzes you isn't the person interrupting. It's your fantasy that if you stand up, something terrible will happen. The fantasy of losing affection, losing approval, losing image. And again, that's Jung, persona, the social mask you wear to be accepted. Sometimes you're so loyal to your chill persona that you sacrifice your dignity to keep the role. But you weren't born to be a role. You were born to be whole. And being whole isn't about being aggressive, it's about being clear. It's saying the right phrase with the right breath. It's not apologizing for existing. If you want to test this in real life, start small, in safe conversations. Use the fourth phrase. I'll keep going and then I'll hand it over to you. Feel the discomfort and don't run from it. The discomfort is the muscle getting trained. A muscle that's been atrophied for a long time. And if at some point you notice yourself shaking inside, remember, courage isn't the absence of shaking. Courage is continuing even while shaking, without becoming cruel. That's real strength. And it's a quiet strength that doesn't need an audience. There are people who talk over you without words. They do it with a look, with a laugh, with hurry. They rush your thinking, like your reflection is a delay. And when that happens, you might finish the sentence, but you finish smaller. You finish asking permission instead of offering presence. And this is where a Stoic subtlety comes in. It's not enough to say the right words. You have to say them from the right place. The right place is your center, your inner government. What the ancients called the hegemonikon, the part that chooses. If you speak with resentment, the other person feels it. If you speak with fear, they feel it. If you speak with calm firmness, they feel that too. The phrase is half. The tone is the rest. And sometimes the silence is everything. The seventh phrase, which closes the set, is a boundary with explicit respect. I respect your opinion. Respect my speaking time. It's not for every situation, but there are moments when the conversation has been unbalanced for too long. And in those moments, clarity is kindness. Because when you let someone run you over all the time, you're teaching them a sick kind of relationship. And sick relationships don't grow. They rot. Notice how this phrase isn't an attack. It's a contract. It recognizes first, I respect your opinion. That takes away the excuse that you're shutting them down. And then it states, respect my speaking time. Here you're showing you're not negotiating the basics. It's not about opinions, it's about method. And method is where life changes. Now, you might be thinking, But what if the person reacts badly? That's a human question. And the Stoic answer is even more human. You don't control their reaction. You control your integrity. If someone reacts badly to a request for respect, you've just gotten valuable information about them. And Stoics love information, not because they like to hurt, but because they like to see. Seneca said we suffer more in imagination than in reality. And honestly, a lot of the time, the reaction you fear is just an enlarged shadow. You imagine a war, and in practice, it's just a small, awkward silence, and then the conversation gets better. But even when the reaction is bad, you still gain something. You recover your own spine inside. You stop bending to fit. And there's an invisible change that starts there. When you stand up without cruelty, you become someone hard to dominate. Not because you win arguments, but because you don't hand over your peace at the first interruption. You don't hand over your dignity out of fear of displeasing. Jung would talk here about individuation, the process of becoming who you are without fragmenting yourself to please others. In simple terms, individuating is stopping the apologies for having boundaries. It's realizing that a life without boundaries becomes a life without shape, and a life without shape is a life where anyone can walk in, rearrange the furniture, decide the rhythm. Maybe you've lived the scene of a meeting where your idea got ignored, and minutes later someone said the same thing and got praised. It hurts. And it hurts because it touches a deep point. Do I even exist? Stoicism doesn't promise the world will be fair. It teaches you to be fair even when the world fails. And being fair to yourself there can mean something simple. When they interrupt you, you come back calmly and say, "Hold on just a second. I'm not done yet." The secret is not carrying hate in those phrases. Hate poisons the hand holding the tool. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, people act according to their nature, their limitations, their confusions. And you act according to your choice. If you turn every interruption into a moral accusation, you become a prisoner of irritation. But if you turn it into an exercise of posture, you grow. There's also a practical, almost physical detail. When someone cuts you off, instead of rushing to fight for the floor, take a 1-second pause, just 1 second. Breathe. Look. Then say the phrase. That second is a portal. It stops you from reacting on impulse. It gives you back control. And over time, your body learns. I don't have to hurry to deserve space. And here's the curious part. When you stop hurrying, people listen to you more. Because you give the feeling that your words have weight. And weight doesn't come from talking loud. It comes from talking with presence. If any of these phrases so far feel too hard for my personality, notice that gently. Personality is a set of habits, and habits can be trained. A Stoic doesn't say, "That's just how I am." They say, "I can educate myself." True education is internal, educating your impulses, your shames, your fears. And if you want to make this even more real, do a small mental practice. Imagine someone interrupting you. Imagine the heat rising in your chest. And imagine yourself saying calmly, "I want to hear what you think, but I need to finish my point first." Not to win, to exist. If this reflection is making sense, hold on to one thing. You don't need to become someone else. You just need to stop abandoning yourself. And sometimes that starts with a simple phrase said at the right time, without theater, without anger, like someone setting a glass of water on the table and saying, "This is my spot too." In the end, what stops people from talking over you isn't the fear you inspire. It's the clarity you hold. Because there are people who interrupt anyone until they meet someone who doesn't fight back, doesn't give in, doesn't beg, just stays. Staying is a rare move, and rarity changes rooms. Maybe you're realizing now that these 7 phrases aren't just phrases. They're ways to protect something sacred, your inner space, your mind, your time, your truth. Stoicism calls this self-mastery. And self-mastery isn't rigidity, it's direction. It's you choosing when to speak, how to speak, and above all, when not to offer your voice to chaos. Let them echo, not as a list, but as small stones in your pocket. Hold on just a second. I'm not done yet. I want to hear what you think, but I need to finish my point first. Can we take turns? I'll listen to you, and then you listen to me. I'll keep going, and then I'll hand it over to you. If I can't finish now, I'd rather pick this up later. Before you go on, what did you hear me say so far? I respect your opinion, respect my speaking time. Each one is a way of saying, I'm here. And if you pay attention, they all have the same root: self-control. None needs aggression. None needs to humiliate. Because the goal isn't to hurt the other person. It's to stop hurting yourself. There's a common mistake, thinking that to be respected you need to harden your face, deepen your voice, become someone you're not. But that's just another mask, and masks cost a lot. Jung would say that when the mask sticks to your face, it becomes a prison. You start performing to protect yourself, and in the end, even you don't know where your spontaneity went. The wisest path is simpler. Be whole, be calm, be firm, and that can be built in layers like a house. First, you learn not to laugh when you want to cry. Then you learn not to apologize for existing. Then you learn to say no without hate. Then you learn to finish a sentence. Maybe you're thinking of a specific person who always runs you over. Someone in the family, a coworker, a partner. And here's a hard but freeing truth. Sometimes these phrases will work. Sometimes they'll reveal that the relationship is too unequal to even be called a relationship. And that revelation, though bitter, is useful. Because a Stoic prefers a bitter truth to a sweet illusion. Seneca talked about true friendships as places of growth, not drainage. If someone always interrupts you, mocks you, erases you, that's not companionship, it's consumption. And when you set a boundary, you're doing a cleanup. Not on them, on yourself. You're cleaning your availability to be erased. But there's one detail I don't want you to ignore. Some people will be weirded out when you change, because they're used to the version of you that gave in. They might say you're different, and maybe you are. Different in the most beautiful way. You're coming back to yourself. And that bothers whoever benefited from your absence. Marcus Aurelius would remind you, don't make applause your standard. Make virtue your standard. The virtue here is simple: mutual respect. If your change requires less submission, and someone calls it arrogance, don't argue. Just keep being clear. Truth holds up over time. And to keep this from becoming some distant ideal, bring it into everyday life. Starting today, pick one of these phrases to practice for a week. Just one. No need for speeches. Just practice. And watch what happens inside you. The anxiety rising, the urge to fall back into the old pattern, the fear of seeming rude. Watch it like someone watching clouds. You are not the clouds. You are the sky. And if at some point you slip, if you go quiet, if you give in, if you get lost, don't use it as a whip. Use it as a diagnosis. A Stoic doesn't condemn himself. He corrects himself. He doesn't dramatize. He adjusts. Tomorrow you try again, with more kindness, with more presence. Now I want to leave you with a question that matters more than all the phrases. When you go quiet out of fear, who's really talking over you? The other person, or your own old story? Your old story of needing to be accepted. Your old story that it's not worth it. Your old story that my voice doesn't matter. If you can spot that story, half the work is done, because what's seen loses its power. If this video touched you in any way, I invite you to write in the comments which of these phrases you most need to practice. Not to expose yourself, but to make a commitment to yourself. And if you know someone who keeps getting interrupted and will see themselves here, share this video with them. Sometimes a simple share becomes a kind of permission. You can stand up without becoming a bad person. And of course, if you want to stick around for more Stoic and psychological reflections, subscribe to the channel and like the video. It helps the content reach people who need to recover their own voice. In the end, what you're looking for isn't winning space in the conversation. It's recovering your place in the world. And that isn't conquered with shouting. It's conquered with presence. With a "hold on just a second" said from deep in your chest. With the respect you give, and with the respect you refuse to give up receiving.